Wenn den Stream startet, du hängst mir das jetzt und dann das zweite habe ich wo?
Das kann ich Ihnen abgeben.
Ja, das hängen wir mal Ja. Ja. Ah, man hört mich schon. Streamer. Yes, you don't see me, but you hear me, which is excellent. Bringst du mir das zweite jetzt noch ins Bild? You don't see me.
This is amazing.
Yes.
This is so cute.
Wow. Genau, ja.
Wow. Is it like a goddess?
Yes, very nice. I hope so. Yes, welcome all. Okay, dear colleagues and friends.
Looking for you.
Yes, dear colleagues and friends. I hope I'm in the camera still, because for your information, dear audience, we are also streaming this. That's why I asked my dear colleague and friend Georg to come unexpectedly on stage and to hand over the Ludic brochure, broche, I think it's English, the Ludic brochure. Thank you, Georg. We don't say more. This is our head of the Ludic Object Lab, and I am Margarete Jarman, Experimental Game Cultures. And I go back to you, to the real important people here this evening. I'm very happy that we are also streaming it, and thank you all very much, especially to Kostis Stafylakis. I made it, and that's why you get also einen Orden. We are in Austria, so you get already. Okay, ich glaube, ich habe es abgeschalten, Georg. Kann man es wieder? No. Okay. So you also get the top secret conspiracy Ludic experimental game cultures Orden.
I have to show this to
you have to show it,
to our friends and to the camera.
If we come closer, then the angel from Otto Wagner starts to rotate like crazy, and that's it. So thank you. Our esteemed guest, Costis, I was very happy to see your work when we had our placings topic. We discussed it in autumn already here at the study department, and we were fascinated about the elements of role play, of performance, of political acts that you have in your works. I'm really very happy that you made it here in person. Wonderful. So we can see, I can touch, and this is perfect, see and touch it, get into discourse. Dear audience here in the Experimental Game Culture Studio and also online streamed. So I warn you, when the questions, we anonymize everything afterwards, so you can still say everything. Yeah, I hope you all agree, just that you know it. I think we don't have 1,000 viewers, but you know, if it goes out, it's out. So we speak in an encrypted role-playing language. That's why you don't know my name yet, but I say it, it's Margarete Jarman, a very serious serious code for Marguerite Charmant, which I'm normally, if I would be really very charmant, I would have introduced first the beautiful other members on stage, which is Babak. And Babak is also a partner in crime tonight, I would say. Yes. Experimental game cultures is your study field and your expertise, and you will host tonight the panel. It is a panel discourse that you see already. It is a Ludic soirée. Therefore, I have the invisible absinthe and say cheers. We drink it then afterwards. And then Babak also generates a discourse in exchange with Sophie Publig. And Sophie Publig is a researcher, and I'm also very happy about the cooperation with the Weibel Institute here at the university, where you are also a representative of. But also I know you as a colleague from events and festivals where we have appearances together in the sense of that we were on the same stage, but after each other as speakers in media theory about the focus on role play. We have been at Republica at the same event.
Exactly.
That's what I remember as last one. And so I'm very much looking forward, because our topic now is play things, but also getting into certain roles when we play with things. We don't say anything about the deeper mechanics of this connection to it, but I think it fits very much to the work of Kostis. I show you his cover, so we are quick.
Absolutely.
Wow,
It's a match.
So have fun. It's a match. Let's hope so, and have fun and enjoy.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So a quick introduction by me as well, like about the curatorial of like why I chose Sophie and Kostis for this event and why in this context of this program. I know Kostis from back 4 or 5 years ago, and he does like stuff about live action role playing, but also using actual toys and streams, RPG games to in a really performative way to actually, and also in a very symptomatic way. This is something we have talked about. Like I perceive his work also like a bit my work, like critical, but the critique is something we are going to discuss tonight with you as well. What does critique mean and what does a symptom mean? And one of the predominant aspects of his work in theory is also the idea of over-identification and like identifying with a specific subculture or a specific really niche part of yourself, that it becomes a reflection, a symptomatic reflection of society or politics. And the other side, also he works with memes. This is another important connection. And at the other side, we have Sophie, which she does a lot of stuff about memes. She identifies as an internet archaeologist, and she researches internet culture, which I really find fascinating, the connection between gaming and internet as part of my own research, how like the one thing informs the other within the context of cyberspace, and also how like the gear theory and like the gear identity you and Charlotte research, for me it has to do with something I call like the Ludic subjectivity, and which also Kostis' work is like this whole over-identification, performativity. It brings to me like diving inside an identity that becomes really playful, and you kind of subvert it and weaponize it against the status quo or against like fundamentals of the mainstream discourse. So it's like in a Deleuzian sense, saying like becoming ludic, becoming playful to disrupt like the normative structures of society. Without further ado, you can start.
Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks for the invite. Like the experimental game culture program. Margaret, thanks very much for this invite. Babak for like organizing this and putting this together. Sophie and the Weibel Institute for being part in this. I think it's a wonderful occasion. I guess I should move there and start.
And
all right. Okay, so can you hear me well? Is everything well? Okay. As the title suggests, I'm here to share a few thoughts on the relation between mimesis and the UnBearable, or ludic mimicry and our surrounding reality. I'll do that with reference to my work, and I apologize in advance for this self-referential context. Please consider this a standard artist talk. My art practice began taking shape in the post-2004 post-Olympic Games Athens, and it's basically a response to the illusions and the deep confusion of that particular era. Since then, I'm part of an artist duo named CAVEX, which stands for Vanna Kostayola, my fellow artist, and Costis Stafylakis, this is me. And together we staged the playful simulations of the situations that surround us, namely a country about to undergo a deep economic financial crisis and a profound social turmoil. And in that particular period, between 2005 and 2011, we presented such things as a company offering team building services to Athenian corporate world, a group of therapists applying new age methods in the workplace, such as these, a labor migration agency for Greeks to migrate to Australia, and others. These simulations were meant to metabolize reality, provoking awkwardness, uncertainty, and reciprocal anxiety. I won't go deep into this sort of early period, but perhaps the only project that I wish to quickly recall is a project called The Black Circle. It began in the aftermath of the 2008 social uprising of Athens that was triggered basically by the murder of a young student by a police officer. And it would also signal the start of a social rift to be followed by a financial collapse and the political roller coaster. At that time, we noticed the sudden emergence of radicalist groups belonging to the fringe space known as third positionism. Things like ideologies such as, autonomous nationalism, radical traditionalism, national anarchism, and so on. So it was around 2009 that me and Vana Kostagiola, Kavex, started working on this awkward and alerting simulations of discourse and aesthetics of local third positionist groups. We drew online material from their web pages. We sampled them with eclectically chosen punchlines from radical discourses that surrounded us, and proceeded to a variety of performances that mimicked the tension of the moment. Our interest was not to offer some kind of direct deconstruction or emancipation from such ideological trends, but to prompt the audience to start processing these emerging ideological systems. The messianic style of these rants, they were speeches basically, was inspired by Peter Mlakar's speech performances. Peter Mlakar is like the official philosopher of the NSK, of the Neue Slowenische Kunst movement. So these Black Circle performances were like delivered in events and shows such as the Truth is Concrete Marathon by Starischer Herbst at Graz, the Palais de Tokyo, and the Media Impact Festival of Activist Art at the 4th Moscow Biennial, under the artistic directorship of Peter Weibel. And Weibel clearly understood, completely understood the work and what it is about, and wrote some sort of enthusiastic words at the catalogue, explaining how these performances sort of alert us to the fact that there is also a tradition, like a right-wing variant within sort of the anarchist universe itself, and that he claimed Joseph Beuys was most notably belonging to that particular variant. This is a phrase from what Weibel wrote at the catalogue of this show. So in making such mimicries, I had to infiltrate certain online communities and recycle their online material. I obsessively updated that infiltrating habit during the first and the second COVID quarantine, like in between February 2020 and January 2021, as a reaction to boredom and isolation, basically. At the personal level, it was expressed as an arbitrary immersion in American life through the systematic navigation in the online world of the American juggalos, which you can see here. The Juggalos are fans of the 90s Detroit rap duo Insane Clown Posse, and following the style of the Insane Clown Posse, they paint themselves as strange clowns, avengers, and react to the social alienation, poverty of the American Rust Belt. by building a radical family of wicked clowns, which occasionally gathers at the annual gathering of the Juggalos to freestyle, wrestle, and bathe in Faygo, which is Detroit's colorful soda. To join the Juggalos, I had to devise an online persona that I named Chloroquine Juggalo. And this allowed me to access their online content and to fish out online material from the conflict between progressive Juggalos and groups of Trump supporters. I thus fed my own online content with reenactments of Juggalo political memes, such as this popular meme with Juggalo jogger, this one, like here's a Juggalo jogger, like assassinating Pepe the Frog, which I also reenacted and live streamed from my small balcony at the Athenian neighborhood of I was then a legitimate Juggalo, and I was producing more content for my Juggalo friends, fighting in martial art dojos in Athens, organizing small parties with amateur like rap music sent by my intercontinental Juggalo friends, and roaming central Athenian streets at night, wearing an oversized toxic spider on my head, influenced by the real life nightmares of a Juggalo friend. This navigation, this alienating sort of becoming a Juggalo, was crystallized in this solo exhibition called Chloroquine Juggalo at Cave Athens in 2021. I think I showed you some of the pictures of the installation and the video and yeah, everything. That was the show back in 2020. You can find much of this material online anyway. Yeah. And yeah, no, we can't do this. It was just after the 2022 Russian invasion in Ukraine that I started to read online articles about the war and contemporary Russian society, which always fascinated me. This inquiry probably polluted my social media algorithm, which started to populate my newsfeed with reels, memes, and footage from contemporary Russia and other countries with a Slavic background. I soon found myself doom scrolling on channels that stream material from contemporary life in Russia, accounts such as Look at This Russian, Squatting Slavs in Tracksuits, The Life of Boris, and others. On such channels, everyday Slavic life is represented as surreal, rugged, paradoxical, and hilarious. This footage featured Russians hugging bears, posing with huge fish in their living rooms, carrying guns on public transportation, and so on. You probably know what I'm talking about. You've probably witnessed this exuberant mimification of Slavic identity, which is reciprocal, like Russian users feed those pages, toying with the very stereotypes of the Western perception of post-Soviet Russia. Central to this material was, of course, the image of the Slavic Russian gopnik, dressed in Adidas tracksuit, dancing early techno, smoking and drinking in some location in the Russian hinterland. The systematic exposure and navigation through such footage gave birth to a new profile, a new persona, this time called Gazprom Gopnik. Here's how it started, with some AI slop. Gazprom Gopnik provided the material for the 2023 solo exhibition Gazprom Gopnik at Cave Athens. The show's idea was to welcome the viewer to a meme cemetery consisting of distressed Adidas logos and awkward revivals of sourced content. This playground aimed to transform the original material from funny and laughable to uncomfortable, ecstatic, and, I don't know, occasionally erotic or homoerotic in particular cases. There's just some pictures from this exhibition, the Gazprom Gopnik exhibition. Yeah. yeah, I mean, it becomes quite weird. Yeah, in many ways. So at the opening, I sought to employ yet another classic, which is the so-called blank room soup creepypasta video. You probably know this one, which I reenacted and adapted to the show's specificity. In the original clip, an Asian man eats and cries while two individuals dressed as Ray characters comfort the man, causing him more distress. An urban myth says the man was kidnapped by the mafia and forced to eat soup made from his own deceased family members. In my reenactment, the large-headed figures inspect me as I consume Russian snacks bought from a Russian mini-market in Athens. Really delicious. There was this kind of blunt cubicle in the space of Cave Athens, of the exhibition space, which somehow resembles the recent backrooms mythology. So this performance was sort of an attempt to physicalize digital folklore and cross-pollinate it with layers, other layers and meanings, which is an element that cuts across my entire material, I guess. The 2023 Gazprom Gopnik show had two more iterations, one at the Cape Gold Temporary Gallery at Lesbos Island, and one at the Eye Altering Gallery at the Thessaloniki, northern Greece. By that time, I was like preparing the shows, and the algorithm was spitting new material from Russia, this time occupied by bears. I was like being fed with reels showing and memes showing a popular animal tamer having lunch with a bear, a Russian influencer photo shooting in an intimate embrace with bears, tough Russian bodybuilders like working out in the snow while a bear offers assistance, and you probably have seen all this stuff. It's quite well known, quite viral. So these incidents of like human-bear exchange landed as a cultural cluster, which I may call the bear vernacular. The bear as a national symbol, the bear worship by ancient Slavs, I think also joins this vernacular, the wooden toy bears of the Bogorodsk area in Moscow, which I'm going to be showing in a while, the right to bear arms meme with like Vladimir Putin riding a bear, the Gopnik bear memes like Misa, the mascot, the bear mascot of the 1980s, Summer Olympic game in Moscow, the Romani bear tamers that used to roam the Balkans, the coat of arms of Berlin, which has a bear in it as well, and of course the gay subculture of bears that also I relate myself to. So all kinds of bears can comprise this kind of vernacular. Therefore, I felt the need to dissect the bear and inspect what's inside it. Just like the algorithm inspected me and my choices, I had to inspect the algorithm back and dissect its content. So at K Gold Gallery, I staged my first performative surgery on a bear. And in these public rituals, I dig into the artificial guts of bear-suited performers in order to regain swallowed toys, and mostly vintage Russian toys from the USSR era or even earlier, such as an abstract like space rocket, wooden space rocket, several babushkas, or the popular Bogorodsky wooden bears from the homonymous Moscow region. I'm going to be showing you this a few images from the surgery and public performance. There's a party that follows the performance. This is the outcome of the process, and this is another iteration, like the third performance I've done with the bears, where I began using the Bogorodsky toys, which is like these small wooden reliefs of bears acting like humans in various like labor scenarios. There's a wooden bear helping a blacksmith, a mother bear washing her baby, a bear slicing a fish, and so on. They were made to depict and instill and teach perhaps a certain work ethic. The next Bear Surgery is scheduled for September in Berlin. You're very welcome if you happen to be in Berlin, around Berlin in September. You will witness another performance that is scheduled to take place there with the bear. This practice of mimicry and play with mimetic frameworks was developed in parallel with a more collective interest in the legacies of role-playing games and of LARP, live-action role-playing, in particular. There is a saga of projects realized with my fellow new media artist Theo Triantafylidis, involving an expanding community of contributors. We call it the Readiness Saga, and it unfurls in several episodes between 2020 and the present. It was also initiated during the COVID quarantine, when we discovered our shared fascination with yet another American culture, the culture of doomsday preppers. There is groups and individuals who prep for a planetary catastrophe, a state overthrow, a nuclear disaster, an invasion, or whatever. The preppers organize in shelters, learn survival techniques, store certain types of food, and so on. We studied their online tutorials. They're very communicative on the internet. We've read their patriotic literature. We even watched them having D&D sessions online. In May 2020, we presented the collective work Notes to Readiness, Step 1. We set up a streaming environment to host an online Dungeons and Dragons session inspired by prepper literature, inventing some sort of a lore, a narrative, whereby the doomsday has sort of taken place already, and the surviving population is divided between a few surviving preppers and the so-called Golden Horde. That is like the feral, animalistic horde of the unprepared. According to the existing apocalyptic fantasies of the preppers and their literature, the Golden Horde will inevitably unite and raid the countryside to rob any remaining shelters. We broadcasted the game on YouTube and used the live chat to allow our viewers to actually affect the course of the game. By the end of the session, a member of the Golden Horde invades the studio and kills the narrator, the dungeon master. So by the end of the first quarantine, in October 2020, we had built a lore that allowed us to stage a fully fledged chamber LARP on this imagined conflict between the preppers and the Golden Horde. So we rented a studio at the center of Athens and invited a dozen of friends and students to play preppers against the Horde. The preppers were tasked to cultivate a fungus capable of destroying the Golden Horde, while the Horde had to steal everything, imprison the preppers, produce Horde memes, and compose, this is the Horde by the way, and produce and compose the Declaration of the Horde. A Horde activist took it upon herself to script the manifesto of the Horde, so she opened her phone and began to translate aloud the Scum Manifesto by the famous Valerie Solanas, except that Solanas' references to men had been replaced with references to the preppers. So she came up with phrases such as, it is now technically possible to produce without the help of preppers, and produce only Golden Horde, and so on. The Readiness Saga involves further episodes, such as the Mutants of Readiness, with a contribution by Joshua Citarella. Here's a few pictures from that streaming. Joshua Citarella as a prepper, as an expert on issues of prepping. Yeah, this is also an image from the Mutants of Readiness. And the work has undergone different installments amassing material from every readiness episode. Here's another installment of the same material, the same work. Rather intentionally, the readiness saga coincided with the election period in the USA. A few weeks after the readiness LARP, horned activists invaded the US Capitol, streaming on social networks what many called a cosplay or a LARP coup d'etat attempt. The awkward similarity between our LARPing activities and the Trumpist horde prompted us to ask whether role-playing can potentially overstimulate the political compass and forecast reality. Can LARP take the form of what people like Oliver Marquardt or Florian Malzacher, for example, have called a pre-enactment? Can it be that thing? The way I tend to think of this relation between reality and mimetic games, the relation between the UnBearable and its bubble, so to say, is again a bit more psychoanalytic than this. Rather than sticking to the old ocular centrism of the Platonic theory of mimesis and its pedagogical undertone, I'm trying to develop an idea of mimetic entanglement that is less ocular, less visual, and more topological. Since the advent of the reactionary internet, the manosphere and Trumpist meme magic, we are constantly reminded of the perils of online mimicry, the dangers of irony, the contagious nature of memes, and so on. These insisting reminders reproduce an old Westernist metaphysics of the psyche, like sharing the same essence with social ideals through the ocular, through the realm of the visual. According to this old mantra, the ocular is the stream that unifies the psyche with the world of ideas. Indeed, there is a mimetic entanglement between our lives and the underworld of 4chan, for example, and this entanglement is, in my view, topological. We do not share some sort of dangerous essence, we share a topos, a common space to navigate or traverse. Some academic friends overseas call this process walking with the enemy. In this upcoming volume by Manchester University Press, I contribute with an essay suggesting that there is always something docile or endotic about mimetic entanglement. There is always something symptomal about mimesis, but not in the profane vernacular sense of reproducing the same symptoms and so on. There is something akin to this late Lacanian notion of the symptom that inspires me here. As you may know, Lacan developed this term, the symptom, back in his 1975-76 seminar, tackling something about the symptom which is not to be cured or prosecuted, a kernel of real enjoyment that holds the subject together. In certain symptoms, there is a part of the real that resists symbolization and anchors the subject with reality. Lacan depicts this symptom by revising the triad of the real, the symbolic, and the imaginary, adding a fourth circle that binds the other three together. In my view, this is good enough to suggest that in mimetic entanglement, we always discover an urge, a kernel of enjoyment, if you may say, that is not critical or deconstructive, and that evades criticality. And to recite a few words by my good friend, political theorist Yannis Stavrakakis, the social importance of the symptom is that, quote, a critique of any ideological system of meaning cannot be effective if it remains at a purely deconstructive level. It requires a mapping of the fantasies supporting the system and an encircling of its symptomatic function. Here is a chance to think of how ludic mimesis contributes to that encircling operation that Yannis Stavrakakis designates. So thank you very much for your time and your patience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kostis. This was very inspiring. When you started talking, I was like, oh my God, I will talk about something totally else entirely. But
Do you want me to?
I think we're actually quite on similar terms. Okay. Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for Babak for putting all of this together. Thank you to Margarete and the team of Experimental Game Cultures for setting all of it up. And I think, yes. Let me just grab my notes. Yeah, so you can see that the topic of the lecture that I'm going to give is maybe slightly different. So I will mainly focus on AI slop and the critiques thereof. But primarily, this will be concerned with the aesthetic panic around generative AI discourse and the consequences thereof. And I actually couldn't think of a better day to actually do that after it was announced today that Soirée is going to be shut down. So maybe we will truly soon see the end of AI slop. But, you know, it will connect to memes, to gaming. Let's just start. So yeah, Magikarp is a water-type Pokemon introduced in the first generation. It has one move, which is called Splash. Splash does nothing, and the game says so explicitly. Nothing happened. Magikarp cannot fight, it cannot defend. In short, it cannot be used for anything in a battle context. Left to itself, it stays useless forever. And yet, there are 3 ways to level up the Magikarp. You can either send it into battle first, immediately switch to a capable fighting Pokemon, then Magikarp gets half the experience from the battle without having participated in it. Alternatively, you can give it the experience share item, which is a portable item that distributes experience points from other Pokemon to the Magikarp, while it just sits useless at the back of the party. And the third way you can do is just simply leave it at the daycare center and let other people's efforts raise it. But in any case, none of these involve Magikarp doing anything on its own. Instead, it levels up through the distributed labor of others. The collective carries it to a transformation it could never reach alone. Which brings me to this amazing example. It's February 2014, and we're on Twitch. It's the early days. An anonymous Australian programmer starts an experiment with Pokemon Red. He built a system that read Twitch chat messages in real time, translated them into Game Boy inputs, and fed them directly into an emulator running Pokemon Red, thus turning the Twitch chat into a collective controller. At times, 80,000 people try to play the game simultaneously. Every single command is executed. What follows is 16 days of a player character bumping into walls, releasing Pokemon into permanent deletion by accident, and eventually defeating the Elite Four and completing the game. It is tempting to say that nobody was driving here, but more precisely, I think that everybody was driving with incompatible intentions and contradictory routes at the same time. This results in the collision of too much agency at once, a distributed field of intention producing an emergent trajectory no single actor intended or could have predicted. Along the way, something else also emerged. Myths, lore, finally a whole religion. This one was centered on the Helix fossil, which was adored as an oracle. The accidentally released Pokemon became martyrs whose legends circulated. Collective meaning crystallized at every random phenomenon encountered. You could say the experience share item operated at cultural scale. Midway throughout the game, trolls then arrived, sent by a rivaling streamer to derail the game and make it impossible to finish. This changed the political system of the game from the retroactively named anarchy mode, where every user's command typed into the chat was executed, to the newly implemented democracy mode, where only the command with the most upvotes was executed. What the trolls made visible was the power topology of the game's mechanics, which always had the capacity for derailing and dysfunction. But don't confuse that democracy mode with the implementation of order. It was a political decision by someone with a specific position in the arrangement to create a new structure and change the topology. Gilles Deleuze speaks here of individuals in contrast to individuals. Individuals are bits of recorded behavior whose distributions can be continuously modulated. This is true for any Twitch Plays Pokemon player. They are a vectorial input whose individual weight is negligible and whose aggregate with 80,000 others produces the output. This is also very similar to how large language model training works. Every text, every post, every annotated preference ranking is a vectorial input. The model is the aggregate, and to stay with our magic card metaphor, the owner of the Pokeball is the owner of the data center used for training. So this lecture states 6 arguments against generative AI prevalent in the arts just to debunk them. I'm stating them up front so you can disagree in real time. And let me stress again my focus on art and aesthetics, as I'm not here to make primarily an argument in psychology or neuroscience. 1. The term AI slop inherits an anti-Semitic accusatory template that determines the very structure of the discourse. It is not a neutral descriptor. 2, 3, and 4. The main charges against generative AI, that it destroys creativity, lacks aura, and steals from artists, are either philosophically confused or correct in ways the advocates refuse to follow through on so they can be used against Gen AI. 5. AI slop is nothing new. What changed is the visibility of production and the disappearance of what we'll call the human alibi. 6. The ecological argument against AI is the only one with genuine material grounding. Sadly, the moral panic around the aesthetic discourse has neutralized it, first by collapsing it into aesthetic disgust, and second by remaining, even in its most serious form, resolutely anthropocentric. And let me be clear, this lecture is not a defense of technology companies. It is an attack on undifferentiated panic, which happens to serve big tech perfectly. So let's dive into that. So everyone's favorite buzzword over the last year is, of course, AI slop, defined as the digital content of low quality that is produced usually in quantity by means of AI. However, this term does not originate in tech journalism or anywhere but on 4chan, of course. Slop as a term to describe degraded mass-produced fast food appears on a cooking and food board from at least October 2015. This comes as no surprises. This is just a regular definition of slop. I'm gonna do a mild content warning for screenshots of some slurs on the next slide. The ideological charge enters with the prefix goy. Goy, or in its plural, goyim, comes from Hebrew and means nation. It is used as a term by Jewish people to describe non-Jewish people. Over recent years, maybe you've encountered it on socials at some point, the term goy was appropriated as an endonym by non-Jews, often to smuggle in the rhetoric of anti-Semitic conspiracies and to declare themselves as victims thereof. Take goy slop, the direct predecessor to AI slop. Goy slop mostly refers to culture produced by allegedly hidden Jewish agents to degrade and pacify the masses. It appears on the politically incorrect board in 2016 as a rage bait threat on kosher food. You can see this here in the top one. Spreading from there, it appears on the film and TV board in January 2020 at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic with a distinctly conspiratorial undertone, and that's the bottom one. So I'll just say it very plainly. This is an anti-Semitic explanatory template. It features 3 components: a hidden intentional agent engineering cultural degradation, a contaminated substance distributed to a passive mass, and a knowing critic who can see through it. This is the skeleton of conspiracy theory rhetoric, and the skeleton also inside AI slop. With AI slop, the villain slot then rotated. The Jews became big tech, then the algorithm, then AI itself. The structure held across every substitution. A template that requires a hidden intentional agent cannot produce a meaningful structural analysis. It can only produce a culprit via a scapegoat. The name we have given to discourse on Gen AI is itself a spectacle. Once everyone only watches the aesthetic output, nobody cares about the conditions that formed it along the way. So, on to our next move. AI cannot be creative, only humans can make art. Especially popular, of course, among artists and creative, this, I think, is just the plain old genius myth in a new dress. When you ask someone defending this whether it means that any human can produce better art than an AI, you quickly see that the human invoked in this argument is quite special, highly skilled, educated in Western art history, and more often than not, troubled by their own genius. It is the anthropos, or Rosi Bradotti's Vitruvian man, individual, intentional, autonomous, universalized through 6 centuries of European aesthetic culture that excluded most actual humans from the category of the creator. The human creativity being defended here is a legal fiction, the romantic artist genius consolidated through intellectual property law and market structures. You see, authorship has always been an assemblage, a group effort. What you make is made through training on what you consumed, within genre conventions you inherited, using tools you did not design, inside institutions whose aesthetic preferences you have internalized until they feel like your own taste. Gen AI speeds up this process and renders it visible. But it was always there. I believe this visibility is what generates the disgust. In contingent computation, Beatrice Fazzi argues that computation produces genuine ontological novelty, so outputs that exceed what was in the inputs. The model is the statistical afterlife of the archive it was trained on, capable of producing something that was not predetermined. The AI is just copying argument fails even before you reach the political argument about whose property interests are being defended here. And of course, every generation of AI output still requires a human interlocutor. The prompt is not incidental to the output, it is constitutive. The fantasy of the autonomous creative machine is the mirror image of the Vitruvian man it supposedly replaces. Both require a hidden human agent to function. To put it very simply, nobody in this room probably thinks that a single author made Dark Souls. The credit screen is the acknowledgement of the assemblage that made the game. Which brings us to the classic argument that AI art lacks aura. So the problem here is the adversarial reading of Benjamin's The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. It is actually the system dismantling, or maybe rather the denaturalization of the very nebulous concept of aura. As Benjamin argues, aura is a classist construct tied to ritual function, presence, and physical uniqueness. Think ritualistic objects with a specific use value. This aura is threatened to get dissolved and reorganized by reproductive technologies like prints, photography, and film. However, this is retroactive legitimation, not inherent property. The claim that art has lost its aura is only made when a new technology arrives. To invoke Benjamin against AI is to perform the precise operation he criticizes in the essay, constructing auratic value in response to a new reproductive technology in order to protect the interests attached to the former one. And we know that conservative aesthetics have done this with every reproductive technology since photography. You know, painting invoked aura against photography, photography against film, film against television, television against the internet, and the internet now against AI. The argument is structurally identical every time, just the technology changes. Then we come to this classic, of course, that AI, steals from artists. So let's return to Fazzi's argument. Generative AI is the statistical afterlife of human cultural archive. The outputs are genuine and exceed what was encoded. They are produced from the distributed accumulation of human work. The experience share item is basically running on the entire internet. The claim that this constitutes theft is complicated by the fact that the same logic indicts the entire history of human creativity. Every artist trained on what came before them without credit and most often without payment. But here's where the charge should actually land and almost never does. The labor that makes AI systems function is not primarily the creative labor of artists whose styles were scraped. It is annotation labor, known as reinforcement learning from human feedback. So workers primarily in Kenya, India, the Philippines, and Vietnam classify images, transcribe audios, moderate traumatic content to, for salary output of between $1 and $3 an hour. This kind of annotation work is constitutive to the models. As workers produce the values and aesthetic dispositions the model will carry forward. They're building the system's character, but are most often invisible in every account of AI creativity. Think about Amazon's Just Walk Out checkout technology, marketed as fully automated AI in 2024. Customers could just walk into the shop and take whatever they needed, circumventing cash desks and queuing, as an AI would record their purchases and invoice them electronically. The AI used was revealed to be approximately 1,000 workers from India watching camera feeds and manually verifying transactions in real time. Once again, the automation is the front end, the labor is behind it, geographically displaced until it becomes imperceptible. Magikarp leveling up. So what I'm trying to say is that the Western illustrator whose style was scraped and the annotation worker in Nairobi are both downstream of the same arrangement. The moral panic speaks loudly about the former and says almost nothing about the latter. The selectivity is not accidental, again. It's a frame doing ideological work, selecting for victims legible as creative subjects within a framework that was always already anthropocentric, recognizing the suffering Western artists as a human and the exploited worker from the global South as nature. But let's go into my favorite critique, which is that, AI art, brain rot content, whatever you want to call it, is low quality, meaningless content. In a recent interview with Dazed, Daniel Lopatin, also known as One or Tricks Point Never, states, "Slop is what we do. It's not particular to AI unless you woke up yesterday." So let me try to show why I think he's correct. And look at a very short genealogy of slop. Starting with Internet Ugly, theorized by Nick Douglas as an aesthetic to capture the amateurish quality of early internet content. So think stick figure rage comics quickly made in Microsoft Paint, the prevalence of Comic Sans, degraded image quality, and blinking pixel GIFs. So in short, slop. Now we see this aesthetic more often than not fetishized as early web nostalgia, theorized as the last traces of human creativity in digital art, and exhibited as rare artifacts of the lost internet of the 90s. Then we have classic internet memes. Think image macros making knee slapper jokes. Impact fonts on a cat ripped from stock image photography, the grammar and spelling of Lal's language, and the edgelord aura of Lead or 1337. The sardony of demotivational posters. In short, slop. Now, the dominant creative form of an early internet culture. It probably only involved a couple of users, but we don't care about the history accuracy here. Moving on to Vine, 6 seconds of nonsense. What are those? Damn, Daniel, back at it again with the white vans. And stop, I could have dropped my croissant. You might remember, Merry Christmas, Merry Chrysler. It's all slop, right? But Vine actually walked so TikTok and Instagram Reels could run. Without Vine's invention of this temporarily restrained comedic grammar, we would not have the short video content that we have today. Which brings us to brain rot content and AI slop, like Skibidi Toilets, like the AI cat stories over Billie Eilish's song What Was I Made For, but rendered entirely in meows. The Italian brain rot hybrid animals like Bombadiro Crocodilo and Tralalero Tralala and Ballerina Cappuccina. They acquire hundreds of millions of views across platforms, primarily by Gen Alpha, and most of the adults get confused by their own obsession with creatures that have no meaning or maybe were never intended to carry any meaning. But you see, this is the same, structurally identical to the Helix fossil religion from Twitch Plays Pokemon. Both are characterized by collective attachment to something with no inherent meaning, acquiring this meaning through distributed participation and retroactive narration. It's the simplest anthropological attribution to what makes a human human. It's storytelling, basically. Some might say, oh, but we used to create weird hybrid creatures before AI using Photoshop. And exactly, so, how is it different now? Oftentimes, this targets what I call the Photoshop alibi. The same content logic was always present, but human labor kind of mediated and therefore masked its industrial, character. So because the slop required human effort, and that effort provided a human alibi. But even the worst content was evidence of a person having been there. Now, allegedly, automation removes this alibi. The disgust at AI output is largely the disgust of recognition. What was always being produced is now produced faster, at greater volume, without the human face that previously made it tolerable. AI slop is therefore frequently a contextual judgment rather than a quality assessment. Content becomes slop when it circulates in the wrong context. For example, when an AI video is trying to fool you into being real, whatever that means, or when it is only kitsch and cannot be distinguished as true art, for whatever that means. The AI cat video on Reddit is always slop, but once that enters a John Raffman exhibition, it's art. When content is identical, the frame makes the judgment, which leads to the conclusion that AI does not produce slop, but metabolizes cultural residue. So let me wrap this then up by now introducing Solid Gold Magikarp. He was a user on Reddit, as you might know. The person behind this user account spent years participating in the subreddit Counting, which is literally just a community that logs in daily to increment numbers upward. Currently, they're past 5.5 million. There is no real coordination or purpose behind Counting. It's a community thing. Solid Gold Magikarp, however, was also a moderator of the subreddit Fish Plays Pokemon, a spin-off stream of Twitch Plays Pokemon where a fish called Grayson plays Pokemon. Depending on Grayson's movements, the commands on the controller painted onto the aquarium glass would be used as game commands. As you can see, these are again vectorial inputs producing emergent outputs that communities formed around. The same mechanism as Twitch Plays Pokemon, but slightly less anthropocentric. Now, as message boards like Reddit became scraped as tokenizer training datasets for early GPT models, through the sheer accumulation of counting posts, Solid Gold Magikarp's name has become overrepresented in these datasets. You probably all know this, but language models do not think in words. They think in tokens or subword units trained on a dataset separate from the model's own training corpus. So the tokenizer learned this unit Solid Gold Magikarp from Reddit, but the model was also trained on a different, larger corpus where this unit was basically absent. The token therefore existed in the vocabulary the model was never taught to use. So maybe imagine it as a word the model knows the shape of, but has never encountered it in a sentence. In 2023, Jessica Rumbelow and Matthew Watkins documented what happened when you prompted these models with the token. One responded with a rant about statistical distribution theory. It's the one you can see below. Others produced just garbled text, loops, outputs that appeared to bypass safety training entirely. Subsequently, these anomalies were called glitch tokens. And these undertrained tokens, they are present in every LLM, typically up to 1% of the total vocabulary. So Solid Gold Magikarp is a ghost in a tokenizer. A name that exists, has no coherent representation, and causes erratic behavior when invoked. In Fatsy's terms, indeterminacy made visible. Not the generative contingency of a system producing genuine novelty, but the structural gap where a token accumulated the shape of meaning without ever acquiring it. A magic carp that got into the vocabulary through one door and found the training had already closed behind it, forever forced to use splash. Nothing happens. And I will skip this, coming to the final argument against AI, which is that, it's an ecological problem, which it is. So take Colossus that you can see here, which is a data center from XAI in Memphis, which uses as much electricity per year as 200,000 American homes. It was built in just 3 months in Boxtown, a traditionally Black neighborhood with a life expectancy 5 years below the national average and a cancer risk 4 times higher. Natural gas turbines were installed here without standard permitting to accelerate construction. Satellite data shows elevated nitrogen dioxide since operations began. The colonial logic runs through data exploitation and ecological extraction simultaneously, always finding cheap labor and cheap land where political resistance is structurally held down. However, the individual generating an image on their laptop is not necessarily the source of this. The hyperscale model, running billions of inference requests per day for enterprise clients, the training runs that consume the equivalent of a small city's electricity, and the facility that needs its own gas turbines because the local grid cannot keep up, that is where the ecological harm is located. But the moral panic about AI slop kind of collapses this distinction, which is equally damaging. It makes every user feel complicit in industrial-scale harm, producing guilt and helplessness rather than political demands, while letting the actual actors off the hook by diffusing responsibility across everyone who has ever used autocomplete. And of course, also this kind of critique often stays very anthropocentric, because the non-human life being displaced rarely appears in the accounting. Data centers, of course, are not built on neutral terrain, and every site has its biological communities. But none of this registers in an environmental impact assessment because the framework, again, only recognizes the human. The moral panic neutralized this argument by collapsing it into aesthetic disgust. When everything is slop, from AI cat images to data center construction on indigenous lands, the material harm becomes indistinguishable from the aesthetic complaints. That is the danger. The panic did the corporation's framing for them, voluntarily, at scale, and for free. So what does AI slop really reveal? It reveals that the human archive was always abundant, always uneven, always produced through assemblages that exceed individual intention. Humans have always made slop. This is simply what culture is when it operates at a great scale, without any filter or selection, without the gatekeeping of institutions that decide what was worthy of preservation. The cave paintings that survived are not representative of everything Paleolithic humans scratched on walls, and the Babylonian clay tablets complaining about inferior qualities of copper are merely the ones that survived. The novels we call classics now are the ones that were reprinted. All of it was always slop, sacralized to the status of art by those who consume the slop over and over. So Gen AI has not introduced cultural degradation. It made it visible. The expectation that culture should look like genius is the ideology of the property relation, the Vitruvian man. I mean, there's a reason why the oeuvre of Rembrandt has drastically declined from 700 paintings to only about 300. Most of them were just attributed to him directly to make profit, but were actually executed by his workshop. So again, the assemblage is overshadowed by the incentive to increase profits. The panic about AI slop is the last stand of that fiction, and it is being made with exquisite irony using a rhetorical template inherited from anti-Semitic image board culture in defense of a concept of human creativity that was never an accurate description of how any human ever made anything. And before you even notice, Magikarp evolves into Gyarados on the accumulated shared experience of everyone who ever posted, counted, annotated, or complained about AI slop. The infrastructure got built in the background while the discourse was busy debating whether the fish could do anything at all. So this is not a critique about multiple fingers. This is, about the annotation workers in a global sound, the lands with a server farm on it, the animals displaced by a cooling tower, the ecosystem silently reorganized to host another data center. However, this critique is much harder to make viral, and that is precisely why I think we need it. So thank you so much. On the channel?
I have no idea.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Ah, Kostis. Sorry.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you can also leave
I mean,
the
it's fine.
lacquer one.
All right.
Ah,
Thank you for the presentation. I guess I have many things to say. I guess many people have many things to say and ask. But one of the main things I took away from both your works and the presentations is like the element of the animal is very predominant. Like you use a lot of animals in your work, like the bear. Even with the LARP with Theo, you had the mask of a pig.
Mm-hmm.
You also have Pepe the frog.
Mm-hmm.
You also mentioned a lot of like Misha the bear, like toys, also like animals. You reference not just actual animals, but also animals that exist either as toys or cultural references that have been toyified, like in a Baudrillard way, like like the fourth stage of simulacra. And like, this is a question to both of you, like why animals, and like why did you choose for today's lecture like the fish of Pokemon? And another thing that made me think, which is a critique I've been telling to people, because I don't consume meat more than 10 years now, and I've been vegan on and off, more like vegetarian leaning vegan for more than 10 years. It's like there's this hype about the ecological footprint of AI and all this like catastrophizing discourse around that. But if you do the research and you find the statistics and the numbers, it's like the global consumption about data centers and AI globally is less than 1% right now. Of course, it poses a threat for the future. But at the same time, there's like the meat industry, which like the global water resources used is more than 65% a year globally, or the main reason for deforestation in the US and the Amazon forest is because of beef. And at the same time, like I see you use like a fish, you're talking about this ecological aspect, but at the same time, I wanted to ask you like, if you have thought about that.
Okay, I mean, have a go. Okay, thanks. Wow, I mean that's quite profound and not really easy to tackle because there's too many layers to it. Anyway, I'm inspired by animals, but I mean I have a cat at home, which is a fantastic experience as well. It's not even my cat; it belongs to the neighbor. But it's like my relation to animals. It prefers me rather than the neighbor. So the cat, goes through my balcony. Leaves the neighbor's balcony, goes to my balcony and visits me. And I'm actually the actual owner of the cat. And this is what happens with animals online, in a sense, that they come from somewhere else. They are already mimified. They're always kind of this other that has been mediated by some kind of enterprise, but some kind of sloppy action. And this is what I find interesting in them and in reusing them. For example, the images with the piggish images with like role-playing the pigs, it was a kind of, I mean, I didn't have the actual time to develop this, but it was basically inspired, and it was a reenactment of Elon Musk's own Neuralink performance. Do you remember the show-off with the 3 pigs in the cages where sort of he had installed a bootleg Neuralink kind of microchip on the head of one pig in order to extract data from the snout of the pig, and then there was another pig that had the Neuralink removed, and there was another pig without a Neuralink at all, and so they were kind of collecting data from the pigs in order to develop this Neuralink, which is something like a human implant. I don't know. I don't know if this project was carried along or abandoned.
So someone who had the Neuralink implant, and he was playing World of Warcraft with that.
Okay.
So I guess it's still on.
Nice to hear. Yeah. Anyway, yes. So, for example, I remember the name of one of the pigs was Gertrude, and I was Gertrude yes. So I became. Yeah, I mean, you know, Pepe, an very mimified image that sort of was overloaded with layers of kind of meaning and of hate and it became a hate symbol, and now it's sort of also there's groups that reclaim it, and also this discussion. There's always something mediated about the animal online, which interests me.
But it's interesting that you say
it's less authentic.
Yeah, definitely. But it's interesting that you say the animal comes to us, there's this otherness to it.
Yeah.
Because when you said cat, it came to my mind I don't consider the cat or the dog like an animal, more like it's a domesticated in between animal and human. The way Haraway talks about cyborgs and the dogs, which I disagree.
I'm just a very alienated person. I've never had a first-hand connection with animals,
yes,
with the kind of animal that you are describing,
definitely,
the wild nature one.
Yes.
I've never seen one.
But I think that actually resonates a lot, because I think there's also so much writing on how we can't really get into any relation with animals without anthropomorphizing them, putting the human above it, blah blah blah. And I think it's true, there probably are not really wild ones out there. But I think also what I'm really interested in that regard is then hybrids, and these because, also Pepe is kind of more of a hybrid figure, maybe than just, the actual depiction of a frog. And I think that really shows a little bit how this other of the animal becomes mixed in with what we consider human, what we can easier identify with maybe. And I do think that this has really a chokehold on most people, and especially online, where cats have been there since day one basically, and are still enriching most of online content. So I just think that the animal often is easier maybe to identify with than actually maybe the human or the machine or whatever kind of thing for most people probably. Also as in cartoons, for example, where we kind of just are conditioned to see us in these hybrids. And that I find very fascinating, because of course it then also tells you a lot about what it means to be human by learning what it means to be a hybrid.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And kind of also during your examples of brain rot content, I hate brain rot, you already know that. And there's always these animals, the crocodile, the shark with the legs, or the crocodile airplane stuff. And it always reminded me of this notion of Heidegger, the thingness of when you have the thing, then the object, when you have an object, back to toys, talking about toys, I was always thinking about toys. Once you have a toy and it's a unique piece and stuff, but once it breaks, it reveals its thingness, and it becomes this ugly mass-produced object which is consumed, and it's part of capitalism, etc. And I was thinking maybe today the reason why AI creations are perceived so negatively, especially images and text and all this I don't know, fear about going on the internet, and people are I can't start internet after AI because I'm always like in this performative notion of understanding, was this AI or not, whether it's text or it's visuals or it's just a video. And I feel like that's maybe all this new brain rot AI generated stuff are some sort of like our new toys, you know, like in a symptomatic way. And like maybe the new, like you can literally now make a 3D model, right? Like take the shark with the legs, 3D print it, and you have a toy actually.
Yeah, you can get those on the streets of like Italy already. Like,
Exactly, you see my point.
Definitely.
So there's something I think like in AI and like toys that is definitely for me connected, but also like this thingness to it, and then we can like it routes back to the notion of machines and intelligence, which you both talked about like this intelligence of like the more than human intelligence, like the anthropocentrism in AI and the anthropocentrism like the way symptomatically, like Lacan talks about the symptom in the sense of like it's something a very human condition, and because it's not perceived as like animalistic, or like animal is something that is like welcomed within the human world or like the world for us.
Yes, but this is perhaps why you have to reconsider your relation to the brain rot thing. You see, I'll tell you an example.
Yes.
Perhaps there's a radical, I think there is a radical cuteness to that, which is what like offers an alternative to perhaps more raw solutions. And it's not an anecdote, it's an actual example that I will mention. For example, there's a good friend of mine, he is a teacher, he's an art teacher at schools back in Athens, Greece. And to be an art teacher at schools, you know, you're bullied. Basically, your job is to be bullied all the time by your students. That's what you paid for. But I mean, wild bullying, like really tough bullying. And it was that day that the content and the way of that bullying radically changed. And instead of like actually, you know, beating him up, calling him things, and like doing very bad things to him, well, they started making fun and asking him like, "Sir, are you tralalero tralala?" And you know, stuff like that. A good alternative to the existing ones. So I see these as sort of explosions of meaning, as sort of empty signifiers that can perhaps regenerate some sociality, some kind of minimally acceptable sociality to a great extent.
So you mean like the humorous aspect of that?
Yeah.
Yes, but the humor is also a social interest, a social kind of condition. Yeah.
We can also say like it has a ludic aspect to it.
Definitely. It be from offensive and abusive, it became ludic.
No, like I totally agree with this. Like, and I think this is also like what you showed so nicely about the communities that you were, you know, looking at, like actually engaging with, like, you know, diving into, and then creating from there, because it really is like in this community where then, you know, actual like, you know, art or whatever we want to call it, you know, spawns from. And I think this is so true also about the brain rot animals, because like, you know, users will just watch these things, or like they find these like images online, and then they start to like narrate stories and myths around them, and suddenly they're in relationships together, you know, and it has like entire like fan cams about, you know, shipping certain characters. And I mean, I don't know if you've seen the Love Island AI fruits, like the cheating scandals that are like running. Okay, like it's weird. Like, I don't know, but like, you know, it just happens all the time. And I think this is the fascinating thing about especially coming together online, is that, you know, users just do that as any community.
Which actually reminds me of like my last input question, and then we can open, of course, the floor. It's like on agency, like you talked about agency, and now this is also, we are talking about agency right now, and reminds me of like how Karen Barrett talks about agency like as a collective thing and not like something individual. And Yeah, I just want to say that actually.
Smart note.
Yeah, I guess we can now open the floor more comments, ask questions. Yeah. Yes, please.
Maybe if I might, I directly connect also. I don't know if you should speak to a mic or so. What was the plan?
Is Thomas here?
Otherwise, you give me your mic.
We can take mine.
Yeah,
And
I
if
give
someone
it back
wants
to
to, they
you.
can
It's
talk.
just in a second. I don't know. Do you hear me? No question. Really, I just wanted to connect also what you said then with this Karen Barat. It's not only the collectively, I think, also which is important there, but it's also this connecting with other entities and other forms than of non-human beings. And I appreciated this with Costis' performative turn also, where we see this connection. I don't know, in a very playful way. I don't know if I hold it close. I don't know the device. Hello?
It should be working here.
Should it be working?
should
It's
be
beaming me up, but
Yeah.
I get that. So it's more this modern human, maybe because I long wondered what is the connection between your two talks. To be honest, no. But now, if I think about this connecting with other non-human forms, and I don't even know if you connect, but you connect with the often non-human form of politics. Yeah, it is like an entity in itself, where only, and this was what you very widely demonstrate, and that's what I really loved. And I think at the Berlin Art Week you are going to show it next time. I will be there as well. I think at the same stage again.
Amazing.
And I really look forward to this in the beginning
Amazing.
of September. And I think the main thing is to encourage it as a live event. And this is something I wanted to focus also on in relation to the AI practices also. The live event and the performative and the physical presence is for me also this reality experience allows it to connect maybe differently with this agency. We discussed also today at the ZKF also forms of agency, processual forms in games with Jing Guyen is discussing, but the Karen Barat take is this collective also with other forms of beings, and maybe also politics is a body in itself that I can see in your work. So you have a new one,
I got one.
and I can give it to the next speaker.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, which is for sure here.
No one expected the Spanish Inquisition, so thank you, Margarete. Okay, then I just drag a question out of my magical hat. So thank you for this utterly smart and inspiring presentation and conversation. I really got a lot out of it, and my question is a little bit about what I'm thinking right now, playing a lot of video games where hyperrealism is so much like this coming to its peak, a language of cliches, the aesthetics of capitalism and so on, but everything is very toned down, everything is very about meaning. Everything is like in a very clichéic sense, caricaturesque even. But now I think we are facing probably the death of hyperrealism. So the aesthetics of polished, marketanized unbelievability is brought to a next step, which surpasses the old hyperreal theorems of Baudrillard and so on. Do you think there is a term for this name of besides AI slop, like hyperrealism, like slop reality or something like that? Or is it still up to you, for example, to make up a new term for this upcoming dystopian reality in place?
I think that's a great question, like speculating on what it would be called. Maybe it's like post real AI slop, or I actually don't know, but like I had the feeling like this kind of moment in time where like we're approaching like real graphics and especially video games, but also films so fast has been like coming for a while now. And I'm also kind of waiting on when is it exactly, you know, gonna be that, because like already like 10, 15 years ago when like there was this huge hype around like 8-bit like games again and everything, people seem to like regress into, we don't need the high definition graphics. I know there are like also like lots of people defending that, which is also totally fine. But like I was wondering if it maybe has anything to do with also the advent of like AR, VR, art, games, and so on. Or if it's like gonna be like this move into the real, you know, into the meat space, basically through LARPing. What would you think?
Well, I mean, but also in aesthetic terms, that's. I think there's a need to reply to how your question expands to art practice itself, to charting the actual tendencies and sort of the existing art field as it is at the moment, and try to figure out, you know, what the next step is exactly and how to call it. I mean, do we actually need the term for this kind of new reality that you sort of both describe? Perhaps a term would be useful. For example, you may have read this Substack article by Twee Whistler on, you know, on the spheres, the different spheres of internet art, suggesting that we've since the period of the quarantine, we have entered like a sort of a third period of internet art, which he calls now internet core. So it's not. So anymore, we're not dealing with net art or post-internet art, which sort of used to preoccupy, you know, a large part of the production of the things. He suggests this a new like era which has begun, which he calls internet core, and it's sort of defined by the spreading and the diffusion of all sorts of cores, you know, slash cores. The advent of AI due to perhaps the pharmaceutical training of the algorithm by like big pharmaceutical companies during the pandemic, and of course also the already existing and the fermenting ontological aspect of the internet. I mean, I think it's not by a complete lack that we had to re-witness in your talk today the early memes and like the lolcats and the advice animals and the, you know, kind of the very early stuff that and it's been recycled and it's been sort of it's sort of recurring all the time in a deferred manner that suggests that you know, we are sort of inhabiting this quite huge archive, which is not dead yet, sort of still alive, or still sort of hunting us in a way. And it seems like all these powers sort of define the which certainly necessitates new terms to be described with. I don't know if I'm the best one to do that, but there's certainly there is a new moment. There is sort of a new space that has been generated, and we have to sort of discover the discourse to deal with it as well as a practice. I think that sort of both. I don't know. I mean, how close thematically our sort of approaches, like talks, were today, but I think that we share a feeling that the old bipolarity of you know, the negation affirmation kind of duality is not very relevant and does not pertain to that moment, to sort of that new reality, and that we have to discover other terms to navigate this new space, which is you know, not exactly digital or not physical exactly, but you know, something that it nevertheless is experienced in a very somatic way. And just to sort of try and reply to Margaret's comment. Yeah, I do think that there is a relation between sort of somatics and the political that sort of mimetic culture helps reinvent and revamp and regenerate in many ways. Not only in a critical manner, not in a deconstructive manner, but in ways of kind of sort of instituting a social bond between subjectivities that sort of share some interests at some point in time, at some communal space which we cannot exactly figure out. But there is some kind of social element there. It's an extension of all social experimentation and social practice that we sort of always have to sort of retain, sort of think of again and again. This is how I tackle this usually. Yeah.
Babak, maybe.
I don't have anything to add. I think they covered it.
Maybe just like to add, this day or the next or the upcoming next is the last days of the metaverse. We have to celebrate that at least.
Absolutely. Failed project finally.
I think that it will start existing now. Since that moment, it hasn't existed. It will now be a thing like Second Life, you know. Exactly. It will now start having a second chance, second opportunity.
Yeah. Like a nostalgia for the metaverse nobody has ever been on, yes.
Anyone else? Questions, anything, comments? You have.
Yes, so it was a whole panspermia, probably covering a million dissertations around internet culture, and I'm full of questions. And out of the whole repertoire of questions, I would choose one. Can you maybe expand a bit more around what exactly is being referenced through the use of the term topology? Is it within the first presentation, there was this commentary that a lot of these artistic practices of over-identification do anticipate this sort of a twist or a turn from the oculocentric or the visual to the topological. What do we mean exactly by this? Is it the cultural logic we operate in? Is it the fact that truth no longer matters? Is it the violence that is generally the ground truth in the end? What is it exactly?
I think you also mentioned topological.
Yes, also. I mean, it reappeared in both, yes.
You can keep the mic.
Sorry.
For now.
You want to go first?
I would say that, thanks for the question. That's really, really nice. I would probably use topology more in the sense of like a structure or a kind of, I don't want to say territory necessarily, because that again makes it very, physical, very meat spacey. I do think it exists everywhere. It's just like how something maybe can be modeled, can be like represented in that sense. It's a silly thing to say, but I often return to Rosi Braidotti's idea of matter as the stuff of the world. And that, of course, is also very much influenced by how we interact with it or how we think about these things. So it really is a very, I would say, a basic term almost to describe, how you can navigate through something. Does that make any sense? Or you could probably also just say, oh, it's like in mathematics, topology,
I mean, probably it's everything, but I am then, as far as I know, although my background is not the most appropriate to access these terminologies, I understand that seems to be a dichotomy between the space and the objects that inhabit it. And the question is whether we're referring to this abstract structure without the necessary conditions of the space that define it in order to start articulating. I suppose that is or whether we do believe that the morphologies are and their distances and everything
Yeah,
is
yeah,
relevant.
yeah. Probably like basically I would question about the map and the territory.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like I do believe more in the territory probably, but I also think that ultimately they're the same. You know, every map that you're using to navigate, you're also interpreting from a certain point of view, and they're kind of, you know, yeah, abstractions from each other in a weird way, if that makes any more sense. But maybe you can.
No, I mean, it's like a road map, but I mean, your
Yeah.
definition covers me. Actually, it's like I would suggest the same thing more or less. It's a logical arrangement of things, and it's an old tool. Of course, it's nothing to be discovered. It's been there, you know, since like the structuralist term in philosophy. Nothing actually new. But the thing that I perhaps choose to mention now is to sort of intervene in a discussion about mimetic contagion and about how sort of memes and mimetic culture is kind of signal today, but several critics as dangerous and as sort of perilous and as something we have to watch out and sort of protect the masses from being kind of corrupted by the hatefulness instilled in actual meme, which exists, and it's there. It's part of what it is there. And I think that in terms of criticism of contemporary art production, especially there was a momentum around 2016, 2017. There was a diffused scare against mimicry, irony, mimesis like semblance, and of course also mimetic subversion or even over-identification, which is of course a legacy of a particular legacy of mimesis in the arts and culture. But there was this Trumpist moment, the moment, you know, of the first Trump administration, that certain art critics replied to the blooming of the reactionary internet with a call for sincerity, you know, returning to some kind of sincere and rational and truth content and stuff like that. And they depicted mimetic culture as something that something contagious, as something that contains an essence that corrupts the masses and so on. And I think that's a very Platonic and very ocular-centric, and in that sense I mentioned, a very ocular-centric model, because then exactly memes take up a kind of Medusian aspect and power of actually killing you by being exposed to them. For example, there was an art critic, a cultural critic that suggested that famously suggested that if you, for example, try, you know, it's this sort of role-playing games, that if you try to mimic the alt-right, you will become the alt-right. And this suggestion is very Medusian, very Platonic, and very Westernist in its metaphysics. And this is exactly what I try to sort of overcome or criticize, if you like, by suggesting that the relation between certain artistic practices, mimetic practices, and spaces such as spaces where hate is produced and circulates and reproduced, like 4chan, like Reddit, like other, you know, spaces, is topological in the sense that we are already stitched to these places. There's some kind of stitch between the user and the space, which you cannot let go. It's not like you choose to let go and negate. Simply, it's not that easy. And that since this stitch exists, then you navigate the same topos, which is also physical to the extent that, you know, our digital reality and online reality is also physical. It's not just metal, you know, things happening in an imagined space, but of course it's physical. But you know, it's a space to navigate. In that sense, I prefer kind of a topological read rather than an ocular and metaphysical understanding of the space we are all traversing, in a sense. I don't know if that's better or worse, but
I mean, I wanted to, because I think like your question kind of also, and Margaret's input on like the spatial real thing.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times I've been thinking about like how like a lot of reality right now takes place in cyberspace and not like in real life, but how much that is affecting us mentally and physically. And to answer maybe your question, I had written in an essay, like I have called this way we are living right now that a hyper-capitalist turned techno-feudalist mixed / extended augmented cybertronic mid-space. I don't know if that covers. Yeah.
You have to write it down.
Yes. It's that
hard to remember.
Yeah.
But we will,
Do we have any other comments? Anything? Question? No one?
No question, but a comment. I really appreciated the correlation between lived internet cultures and like internet cultures that only exist in like a digital realm. I don't know. I appreciated like the constellation of you two. It was very refreshing but very pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No one else? Don't be shy. All right, so if we, last chance. Okay, so if we don't have, then I guess that's all, folks. Thank you so much. Thank you, Margareta, and the Experimental Game Cultures team for setting this up. Thanks for everyone on YouTube that joined the live stream. And thank you too, of course. Thank you for coming. Many thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, that's
Thank
all.
you.
Yes.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. I'm so blind by now.
Yes.
Okay.
How should we
Should we end the streaming first?
Yeah.
It's too dark. Maybe stay.
Okay.
Maybe we can move these.
Then, yeah. Then maybe let's.
I'm taking a
Okay.
Super light.
It did before. Yeah.